right, here we go. So on the box we got written, it's the AFS DX Nikkor 55 to 300 millimeter f4.5 to 5.6 G ED VR lens. And of course it's got that vibration reduction technology in there for added stability from the lens. Looks like we've got an accessory box up top, and in the middle is the lens. Interesting. Instruction manual's there. Lens right here. No extra bubble wrapping. And here we go. A lot of plastic in this lens to keep it as lightweight as possible for a 300 millimeter. Okay, we've got here the branded back cover. And we've got a branded front cover. There's your lens right there. Beautiful as always. Looks like on here we've got a couple switches. We've got one for automatic and manual. And we also have one to turn the VR off and on. Right on the lens there. And of course we've got our focal length written here as you go through the zoom. 55 all the way to 300, and pretty smooth. There's some slight give there on the end where the 300 millimeters sets in. And some interesting noise there you can probably hear. And let's see here, the focus ring. Looser than what I'm used to with the AFP lenses. I'll be interested to see if that looseness, it's not nearly as firm, it doesn't really have a constant resistance to it. It just kind of feels like a loose fitting. I'll be curious to see how that looks when I do a manual focus. And of course automatic focus, I'll be curious to see how it looks. Alright, there we go. So that's the lens for you. Let's slap it on to the D7500 and see how it performs.
As always, when it comes to zoom lenses, we're looking for that continued crisp, clear shot when at the far end of the focal length. And this AFS 300mm lens did quite well. Here's an example of the range of this lens in the same scene, first at 55mm and then zoomed in to 300. Since the fastest f-stop available on this lens is 4.5, I didn't expect much success in low light. However, I was pleased to find it performed pretty well with some attention to a steady hold. These moon photos, for example, were taken handheld, although I was holding my breath during the shots. There were noticeable limitations, however, even in good lighting with moving subjects. When looking closer at this photo of a moving biker, you can see the inaccuracy of the autofocus that I was dealing with. The same was true with these birds, where I was getting varied success with the autofocus keeping up with their quick movements. Even with the subject simply walking at times, I found the result to be less in focus overall than with a steady subject. However, this lens did pass the PI test with flying colors, and the barrel distortion at its shortest focal length was minimal.
Alright, there you have it everyone. The AFS 55 to 300mm zoom lens from Nikon. A pretty stellar zoom lens that does its job quite well. Just keep in mind that it works best in more lighting. Outdoor lighting is your friend really, and more so during the daytime. But beyond that, it does a great job fulfilling its function as a zoom lens. Now I also appreciated the zoom range going from 55 to 300mm on the focal length. Keeping in mind that this was made for DX format cameras, and that DX format has that crop factor. So it's just nice to be able to go out that little extra distance to 55mm instead of being stuck at 70, kind of like the AFP lens I just reviewed. But overall it works quite well, and that vibration reduction technology works just as well in this lens as it does in the newer AFP models that have come out. With the one difference being this automatic manual button actually locks out your ability to move the focus ring with an automatic, because it's not an M/A mode or manual automatic mode. It's strictly automatic, it's strictly manual, which for people that have gotten used to the MA option on lenses might find that a bit annoying that they have to slap an extra button, which Nikon has already kind of spread out our controls with autofocus anyways. So you have an extra button to do there since it's automatic only, manual only. Beyond that though, not much more to say because it's a great lens and it took some great shots as you saw there, and some impressive night shots besides the fact that it has that max stop at 4.5.
Hi, it's Erin from DP Review, and this is the Nikon 35mm f1.8 DX lens. This is a small, inexpensive lens targeted at Nikon's DX format entry-level DSLR users. It focuses fast and accurately, and a fast maximum aperture allows for handheld shots in low light settings, while fast shutter speeds avoid blur. This lens comes highly recommended from DP Review and is a great choice for everyday use for Nikon's entry-level DSLR DX format users.
What's really nice about having a standard lens is it's not wide, but it's not telephoto, so things like this are just like perfect. 50mm is said to be closest to replicating the human eye. It's very natural feeling, you kind of just know how to frame your shot. On a DX cropped censored body like this one, it's equivalent of 75mm, which can kind of be used for portraits. But what's nicest about it is it produces a magnification level of almost 100%. So if I have both eyes, it looks almost as if this is my eye, so I know exactly how the shot should look. With a big aperture like 1.8, you can freeze motion pretty easily. The 7 rounded blade aperture gives very smooth, round bokeh balls. Now, because of the big aperture, you don't get VR, but you can still handhold the shot pretty well. Now obviously this isn't a macro lens, but you can still get pretty close. Let me show you. 50mm lenses are simple and cheap. For $200, this is very nice. The build quality is also exceptional. The focus ring on this lens is a very nice size. It has a nice feel, and you can see this window right here. There's full-time manual control, and there's an AFS motor for quick and quiet focusing. Now all of Nikon's lenses are technically weather sealed. This one also has a rubber ring around the mount to help seal out water even more. The AFS motor focuses quickly and quietly. However, for removing objects such as these model trains, your best bet is to pre-focus the lens and wait for the train to come into focus before taking your shot. If you can focus these images right, you will get amazingly sharp images with a lot of detail. Because of the simple design of the 50mm, there is minimal distortion, and vignetting is also hardly noticeable even wide open. On a DX crop censored body like the D7000, you won't notice it at all. This lens is pretty good for portraits, but obviously we can't show that now considering it's kind of dark outside. So let's fast forward to tomorrow and I'll show you some. Surprise! It's a month later and we still haven't taken this shot. But we don't exactly have a model and it's kind of cool. So we're going to just take one shot of Erin right now and we'll just do some close-ups of it to show it. I'll use a pretty fast shutter speed. It's kind of bright out. Sounds good. Look, okay. Back to 20 days ago.
Early morning is my favorite time to photograph anywhere. But in Bali, it's even more special, as every morning the Balinese prepare their daily offerings. These offerings are hand-woven out of palm leaves and filled with delicate flowers, sweets, and incense. The Nikkor Micro 40mm DX lens helps me get extremely close to these offerings. The f2.8 aperture allows me to isolate the beauty in the detail of these offerings, while softly and naturally blurring the background. What catches your eye?
Well, the smoke and the flowers look beautiful. I don't know if we can compose something with both of them.
Okay. This lens is really great. You can actually get extremely close to the flowers. So this lens is all about getting the beauty in the detail.
Right.
It's great. It's nice with the smoke coming in too. There you go. Let's see. Perfect.
Wow, it really isolates.
This lens is also versatile enough for everyday photography. That means we can switch between making macro images, food photography, or portraits, all without changing our lens or sacrificing image quality. Some of my favorite pictures to shoot are location portraits because they allow me to make the environment as much a character as the people I'm photographing. Ulaanbaatar is a rapidly modernizing city with a thriving youth culture. Chantal and I are meeting up with a few young Mongolian skateboarders to experience the capital city from a younger perspective.
I got a question. How do I get my portraits to look better?
The most important thing when shooting portraits is that we choose the right lens. And with the AFS Nikkor 85mm f1.8G, we have that covered. This is an optimal portrait lens inside or outside of the studio. I love it because it allows me to create a beautiful shallow depth of field in my photos.
So how does changing the depth of field affect our portrait?
Here in this abandoned building, we have these amazing murals and graffiti art on the walls. And what's really great about shooting with a shallow depth of field is it lets our subject pop out from that because it really blurs and softens the background. A good rule of thumb whenever making portraits is to always focus on your subject's eye. This becomes even more important when shooting at f1.8 because our focal plane is so shallow. This lens is great for details. It allows us to capture subtle features in the faces of our subjects and render artistic and textured portraits. With our subject crisply in focus, this lens creates beautiful backgrounds, which helps give each portrait a unique personality.
So today we'll be reviewing the Nikon 60mm macro lens that is used for up-close photography. Kind of going through the reviews of it. This is a phenomenal lens, has a lot of unique uses, and I'll show you a side-by-side comparison of what the photos look like and also what the live video test looks like. Comes with the end cap right here, and then also your standard Nikon lens cover. It does have the option to switch between manual and autofocus on the lens itself. It does have the external aperture ring. This is an end lens with a ED glass as well. So if you like to look at the aperture and so forth from an external view, you've got that option as well. Main uses I get out of this lens are for, up close photography, and also it does come with a lens cap right here. I mean a lens hood, which is good for getting rid of the sunlight and so forth. Especially if you're using up close macro photography on like flowers, or if you're trying to document personal items like wedding rings. Here's a side comparison of the length of it with just a ballpoint pen. It's not very lengthy lens. The hood is actually pretty long. I was quite surprised on the length of it, but standard lens hood. Interesting is when you look at the diameter of the opening of the lens on the external side, it's actually not that big, hence the macro physical design. In fact, here's a golf ball I use as a comparison to it. So it's about, I'd say a little bit smaller than a golf ball, but not too close from it. So right now I'm going to do an autofocus test on a golf ball, and you can see well, I actually have a photo as well I'll use so you can see it from a zoom in standpoint, but the field plane of focus is so specific. As you can tell, it'll focus on the TaylorMade itself, the wording, and actually on the towards the end of the video you'll actually see a photo of it. When I zoom in, you'll actually see the letters are even sharper than the exterior letters. And if I move it over here and try to, well, let me adjust the focus real quick. So when I adjust the focus right here, you'll be able to see how it alters the plane of view, or how it alters the field of focus and how finite of a field it is. I'm going to grab this pen and show you. As I move it up and down, you'll see it come into focus, and it will eventually leave being focused as well. When I focus on the pen, you can tell how the golf ball in the back kind of fades out a little bit. Again, this lens is so pin sharp with different distances. It can give you some really cool images. And you'll see as I can slide this in and out of the field of focus, it is very, very sensitive. So this image is, I took of the golf ball at the same distance where that pin was in the center. And I've got a couple different shots here. One is just the how it is standard before I zoomed in and cropped. And you can see how it's the actual little indents on the golf ball are, super in focus around the words, and they start to fade out as the golf ball kind of rotates. Now, in the next image, you'll be able to see when I zoom in how close the letters are in focus, and the detail from even the ink that comes from the golf ball. This lens overall is one of the coolest lenses in the amount of lenses that I own. It is very specific. I don't find myself using it as much as I thought I would. However, though, when it does come to photographing up-close objects, or if you're really wanting to get a very, very defined field of focus, this lens will let you accomplish that. I have had some people ask if I can use it for just, everyday photography. You can. Obviously, you got to take into consideration the size of the glass on the exterior of it, with the amount of light and so forth. But this lens is probably like I said, one of the coolest lenses that you can have when it comes to taking some real cool artsy type photos. Again. Okay, today we're going to be reviewing the ever so small Nikon 200 to 500 millimeter super telephoto lens. And the reason I purchased this lens was, first off, it's the best bang for your buck in my opinion, under $1,500. And second of all, quickness of it is, I think, just as good, if not better, than the 80 to 400, and it accomplishes a lot more than I expected. So let's look at the outside of the lens and see what it has to offer. First thing to note is, if you notice right here, this is the lock mechanism for the 200. So if you know that you're going to be traveling with this, or if you're going to be out and about and you don't want the lens to keep falling down per se, you can lock it in at 200. It will not zoom out. Also, if you disengage the lock right there, This sucker does go all the way from 300 to 500. Let's see what the lens looks like when we fully extend it out. So currently I can barely even get that in the frame. So this is what the lens looks like when it's fully extended out. You have the end of the lens right here, as well as that. On the underside of the lens, you've got your ring that's attached to the mount for your tripod or monopod. I've just got right here my Manfrotto quick release attached to it, so that would be removed and it would look just like this. Okay. As far as the buttons go, let's get into that for a second. You're going to have your autofocus, which will be your manual versus your automatic. Here you've got your zoom limiter, so you can do it where the autofocus goes all the way from the full range, so the full 200 range, all the way to the 500. If you know your subject is always going to be, I believe it's 20 feet roughly, at least 20 feet or further, you can put this limiter on, so that way the actual autofocus will be quicker internally. Usually your subject is going to be further than 20 feet out, so definitely helps when you're trying to photograph moving subjects. You've got right here your VR standard vibration reduction on or off, and then you've got your normal and sport mode for your continue autofocus. This lens also comes with a ever so small lens hood, and I will bring that into picture right now. There's the lens hood. As you can tell, that sucker is huge. So if you were to add this to this lens, okay, so that is on there now. The size of this thing, with it not even zoomed out, I'm locked out right now all the way, and it barely even fits in my camera. I mean, this sucker is not by any means small. Now let's head outside for a live demonstration. So we're going to go 200 millimeters, and we're going to go straight to 300. That right there is going to be 300 millimeters. Now we're going to go from 300 to 400. That is 400 millimeters. We'll go ahead and refocus. Now we'll go from 400 all the way zoomed out to 500. We'll go ahead and refocus. So 500 all the way zoom back out to 200. And that is the zoom distance.